Thanks for the intro. Just to hit everyone's name in full here, Rob Hall, President of the Trauma Free World, Rita Soronen, President and CEO of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, the Wendy Thomas, who needs no introduction, and lastly, Alex Steinhilber, who's Director of National Sales at Keurig Dr. Pepper. So I think this is a perfect kind of panel to continue a number of themes that have been brought up today. One is organic partnership. This is one of the most organic and enduring partnerships that exists in business that I know of. And also values. So we'll hear more about that as we go. And I'd be remiss to not introduce myself and my company. I'm with Stingray Advertising. For those of you who don't know Stingray, we're a global media company focused on all things music. We have over 100 radio stations, more than 30 TV channels here in the US. And I run one of the fastest growing divisions, which is our in-store media. We actually do in-store audio in over 30,000 stores in North America and work with many nice folks like yourself to bring messages to those consumers. But enough about me. Why don't I ask the panelists to each introduce yourself and explain your background and connection to the cause of helping children. And I will also ask you to share your favorite Wendy's food item, and I'll go last on that. So, Alex, why don't you kick us off?
So my favorite Wendy's food item is the Big Bacon Classic, right? So if it's Wendy's, it's got to have cheese, it's got to be beef, and it's got to have bacon. Fries are good too, and as are the Frosties. I don't think anybody's thing. But no, I have the privilege of working with the Wendy's brand. This is my 10th year dedicated to the business and directly supporting Wendy's, and then through the DTFA, through Wendy's in our business relationship. At Keurig Dr. Pepper, Wendy's is probably, I say probably because I can't actually confirm this, but I know it's our longest continuous relationship in the restaurant channel. It goes back to 1969 when the first restaurant opened. And it's our third largest food service customer. So Wendy's is incredibly important to our business. And their cause, the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, is very near and dear to our hearts. At Keurig, one of our mantras is drink well, do good. And we encourage our 27,000 employees to be active in their marketplace. And the DTFA feeds into that because they directly support the neighborhoods and communities that we live and operate in. And we owe those communities, they're the basis of our livelihoods. So the DTFA fits into that.
I'll go next. I'm Wendy. I was a little bit younger when my dad started Wendy's. So I was 8. I'm only 18 now. Just kidding. So I am the brand face, just a little bit older. And I'm a Wendy's franchisee also. So I have 49 restaurants in Ohio and PA. So I'm in the business. And I'm also sitting on the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. I was there when my dad started the foundation back in '92. And it has grown tremendously because I think this has been mentioned many times today, is about values. And my dad was just said, you know what, if we do well, we got to give back. It's our responsibility. And he was a foster kid. Sorry, I'm going a little bit longer. And he always got asked, why didn't you want to know about your parents? Why do you want to know this? Well, he had a horrible foster care adoption. But that didn't stop him because, you know what? He realized there's so many kids in foster care that need help. And it's our responsibility, not their responsibility, to help them. So he just started asking people, can you please help? I don't know how to do this, but we're gonna do this together, along with other franchisees, our customers, our partners like Dr. Pepper, a lot of different partners, but it took a village. It wasn't just like my dad, like, oh, okay, let's do this. It wasn't like that. And then when Rita came on board to the foundation, it just soared. I mean, I think there's over 120,000 children out of foster care that are in loving, permanent homes today. Is that enough? Absolutely not. We have a lot more work to do, and Rita I'll let you go ahead. Sorry about that.
Thanks. Well, I'll start with my favorite food. It's, I'm sure you all do this, you just don't admit it, and your kids do it, but you take your fries and dip it in your Frosty, right? That's my treat when I've been good. But I started out in this business. I was working on my master's in landscape architecture, and my oldest daughter was just an infant. Something happened in our neighborhood where an infant passed away as a result of abuse, and I was primed. And I had always been one of those kids that came out, much to my parents' dismay, kicking and screaming, "That's not fair," when it came to kids. I just wasn't sure how to channel that inner sense of justice for children. This triggered it, and so this was a million years ago, but started out in the child welfare system, learning about those dynamics of abuse and neglect. Why do children suffer from abuse at the hands of those people who should be caring for them most? And it went through a number of jobs, but just about 20 years ago, was honored that this position was offered to me to bring to full circle that sense of, right now, as we're sitting here today enjoying this great conversation and really passionate information about causes and how cause marketing can make a social difference, there are about 350,000 children who are sitting in foster care. They're there through no fault of their own. They've been abused, neglected, abandoned, trafficked, and they're no longer with their family of origin. Our goal is to get them back home, make those families safe. But for about 109,000 children, a judge has made that very hard decision to legally terminate that parent from child. So we have about 109,000 legal orphans in this country, simply waiting for what we promised them that day we separate family from child, that we will find you a new child. What drives the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, which is a national nonprofit public charity singularly focused on increasing the adoptions of children in North America's foster care systems, what drives us is one more statistic: 20,000 children year over year over year turn 18, they've been freed for adoption, and they leave the foster care system without a family. And so the likelihood of potentially negative outcomes is increased for those kids because they don't have the safety net of a family. They're not bad kids, but they don't have that safety net, and so they're much more likely to be homeless, to be undereducated, unemployed, early parents, all of those kinds of things that move them right back into systems. So that's what drives the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. Under this, we're created under a mission of research and accountability. We're driven by this notion of a lens of equity and social justice, but we only do this, our success only happens through collaborations and partnerships, and that's why I'm so honored to be in this panel today. Okay.
All right, I'll get the food out of the way. In a younger version of me, a Baconator was my favorite, but since then, my physician has told me I probably shouldn't eat Baconators anymore, so the apple pecan salad is now my favorite Wendy's item. Yeah. So I usually cheat with a large fry to go with my salad just because, but I just don't tell my doctor about that. So in a previous version of my professional life, I was a therapist. I worked primarily with kids, this is in the 90s, who had experienced sexual abuse and incest, kids under 12. And I wasn't long for that work. I did it about 6 or 7 years, but after a while, I just couldn't do it anymore. And this is before trauma really was a thing, right? In the 90s, trauma is a relatively new field, especially childhood trauma and the effects of childhood trauma, which we may have time to talk about later. But I didn't know any of that back in the 90s. It wasn't a thing. Fast forward to about 10 years ago, I worked for an organization that was sort of the Trauma Free World was birthed out of that organization, which was a global orphan care organization. And that's when I began to really learn about and dig deeply into trauma and the effects of trauma, especially on children and their developing brains. And what we learned is, all of the social determinants of health that we're talking about, gun violence, depression, suicidality, learning problems, all of these things, most of them have their root in childhood trauma, right? Even physical maladies like diabetes, pulmonary heart disease, those kind of things have their roots in many cases in childhood trauma. So not only mental, but physical health. And what in 2019, the World Health Organization came out with a stat that over half of the world's children have experienced developmental trauma. That's ongoing abuse, neglect, abandonment, violence, refugeeism. So over half of the children in the world have experienced developmental trauma which will affect them for the rest of their lives. And as we've heard, I think so well today, the key difference in every one of those children's lives is a caring adult in their life. So how do you meet the needs of almost 400,000 foster children? How do you meet the needs of over 1 billion children? You have to empower a caring adult in their life. And so that's what Trauma Free World does. We're kind of on the back end, right? We want to make the Dave Thomas Foundation shine by giving the Dave Thomas Foundation the tools to do their job even better than they do now.
Wow. It might be worth just giving a touch more on what those tools are, just so people have a little sense of the 360 of what you do for the foundation.
Yeah, sure. So Trauma Free World was initially a training organization like many of you may have been to before. You know, you go to 3 days, you know, or it's a one-day seminar, you do something online training for professional development. And, you know, what we began to realize, there's so many obstacles to that being an effective method of reaching adults to care for kids, right? I don't have the time for training. I don't have the money for training. It's in English and I don't speak English, right? So much of it is about a Western culture and I'm from Bulgaria or Lebanon, right? Or I don't understand it because it's really meant for college professors, right? And so the average foster parent, for example, they don't have the time, the energy, the money, even perhaps the literacy levels sometimes to engage in traditional training. And so about 2 years ago, when ChatGPT kind of jumped on the scene, we just thought, might it help Trauma Free World to create a large language model that basically you could take home in your pocket. At that point, it was called Brandy because we had a trainer named Brandy, and we thought, what if you could take Brandy home with you? Like, what if she was just available 24/7 and she spoke your language and she never got tired and she never ran out of empathy, right? Maybe AI could do that. And what we found out is that AI can deliver on all of those things. Everything that got in the way of people engaging in trauma-informed care, becoming that caring adult in the life of a child, was addressed by generative conversational AI. And I'll just say real quickly, we really think that this AI initiative is almost like the printing press, right? It is the modern version of the printing press. People couldn't read, they didn't have access to books, the printing press changed that. An adult who is directly connected to a child, whether through mentorship, foster care, a teacher, doesn't matter. We can now speak their language 24/7. They can take out their phone and say, how do I build trust? How do I take a new foster child into my home? And you can get an expert answer immediately all the time. The last thing I'd say real quick is there is an additional beneficiary, and that's the adult. How can I remain healthy and engaged in the fight, right? We have a primary beneficiary, which is a child. Our secondary beneficiary is a foster parent or a mentor who says, I want to give up. And to be able to get on and say, I don't know what to do. How do I stay in this? They have access to a coach 24/7 every single day that allows foster parents and their children to benefit.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's a perfect background. And we've got a bunch of information on AI and a deeper dive here. But before we do that, I thought it would be also useful to have a little context from Wendy. I didn't say what my favorite thing is. I love Frosties. And the cool thing about when you buy a Frosty is they ask you if you want to buy a Boo Book. And I did, and I get some free Frosties coming up. But with that, I wonder, how did that all turn out? You just did this.
So we just had a program, if anybody went to Wendy's recently, we were selling Boo Books, which is basically get 5 free Frosties. And actually the whole system, there's over 6,000 restaurants. We all get in there and we do it hard. And we actually raised $10.6 million for the foundation just in Boo Books for the 4 weeks that we were running. But is that good enough? Never. If my father was here right now, he's like, that's it? Like, we need more. And that's the cause marketing between the Wendy's brand and the DTFA is just really powerful, and we need it to get more powerful. And we're constantly, Rita and I are always like, we got to get better. We got to, help us. I mean, you guys are the marketers out there. Help us get this better because we really are solving an issue in our country, and that's these foster kids. They don't deserve to be there. They don't need to, age out. They need our help. So coming in a week, you can buy your Frosty key tags, and then you get your free Frosty for a whole year. So please help us. They're $3 a piece. They're worth every cent of it. And we're always just building that awareness. Like within my stores, we try to educate our crew, our managers. What is foster care? How can you impact? And how do you teach your customers that are coming in? And how do you tell them within seconds? And I think that AI thing might help us there because, we have different languages too. So we need a little bit of help there. But I think we can really help solve some of our issues with the foster care system because, again, it's not their fault. And my dad would just be, one thing before he departed this world, his last words were like, sorry, I get really emotional on this, is I'm just not done. I'm just not ready to leave. And I'm like, you know what, Dad, we got it. I got Mom, my brothers, sisters, we're all going to be good. We'll be, we're going to keep this brand alive, and fresh quality is our recipe. Everything that you built, we're going to do. And he goes, no, it's the foundation. I'm just not done. I said, we got you. We will keep marching because it is a powerful organization, just like the organizations we heard today, Big Brothers. What a fabulous organization. I mean, there is no bad organization, nonprofit out there. But, that's just our mission, our brand is to keep Dave's value alive. And let's just keep rolling. And so we're going to just keep pushing and help keep building awareness on foster care adoption because it's really important in our country.
And Wendy, can I add, and thank you, that was amazing.
Sorry.
The brilliance of the in-restaurant campaigns isn't you don't just get a free Frosty. You have to come back and buy something, then you get your free Frosty. And so the corporation has shown an increase with those coupons and sales. That's the brilliance. So it's not just, and they would do it even if that wasn't it. They would give to us every day, and they do, and they've done so much. But the brilliance is the giving back to the corporation as well.
It's just really all of our responsibility of giving back. Like, you make some money, you got a little bit of responsibility there, and you got to give back to whatever cause. I mean, there's, again, so many great causes out there, but you do have to teach and your children and our other children, the world, we got to give back because it's very important for our country and for the world.
Oh. Wendy, thank you for sharing. There's nothing more authentic than your family values and the impact it's had on your company and the world. So thank you.
Values are everything. Wherever company you're with or who you're with, make sure you set your values and make sure you live by them because they go a long way and it pushes and it keeps people driven too. So it's a win-win.
Well, I'm going to take a little bit of a lighter skew for a moment just to it's a bit of a lightning round. How do each of you currently use AI in your daily life, and what's your favorite app or tool? Starting with you, Alex. I know you're a big AI guy.
I know nothing about AI.
I'm kidding.
My kids tell me it's great, and they write papers at school, but I do not use it.
Okay. And Wendy, I'll just go down the line there.
I wish I knew more about AI too. We're testing that in the Wendy's system right now through the drive-thru, so there's a lot of work to be done. But I wish I had it today because I got scammed today walking in here. And if I had an AI, I probably could have done something about it really quickly. So
That's a good use
I need
case.
to learn that really quickly.
Well, personally, it's our connection to Trauma-Free World. When they said they were developing this tool that could help virtually every one of the kids that we serve, said we're in. We are absolutely in, and the partnership is there. So that's been my big learning about AI is through Trauma-Free World. Personally, I'm kind of like these guys, a little chat GPT, and that's about it.
So I've given ChatGPT a name. We call ChatGPT at our house Gary. I don't know how we got the name. By the way, one of the ethical issues with AI is that people become they can't tell what's a human and what is a machine, right? So I don't necessarily recommend just calling it something, right, or creating a video that's a deep fake or anything like that. But it's just easier than saying ChatGPT at our house. So we just say, hey, ask Gary. But professionally, the thing that's really nice about, well, not nice, but the thing about nonprofits is we usually have a bare bones staff, right? And AI has become something that scales our staffing, right? We have to learn how to use it because I just can't go out and hire, 5 grant writers yet, right? So ChatGPT is a grant writer for us, right? I can say, hey, I'll tell you a quick story if I can. I was writing a grant last week and I didn't even realize that ChatGPT now remembers all of your conversations, right? It can learn from all of my conversations. I hadn't quite picked that up in the grant writing. So I said, hey, can you write an outline for a grant I'm writing? And I gave it some of the parameters. And it wrote the whole grant. It didn't write an outline, right? It wrote the whole thing. I made a few edits. I sent it in, and they said, thank you very much, and we got the grant, right? That would have taken me weeks to research, to write it specifically. So not only on the professional side, like, what can I have that's like the Mediterranean diet, and what do I need to buy at the store?
Frosty.
Right. But professionally, it can scale your work, and we're seeing that in a nonprofit way of being able to scale what we do.
And arguably, that really is your role. You're sort of an outsourced partner handling AI for a really valuable foundational cause here. So as you're doing it, I mean, how are you customizing this to be seen as authentic and to translate? You're doing this for the UN or refugees, and now we're talking about adopted kids that might be in Ohio.
Sure.
I mean, how do you build that bridge between those worlds?
Yeah, so if you're an AI user, you may know you can prompt AI. So we're using ChatGPT, but we're able to personalize that ChatGPT through something called prompt engineering, persona building, right? And so when we engage with Dave Thomas Foundation, we can ask the foundation, so what would you like AI to sound like? Like, what kind of persona would you like? Do you want multiple personas? Would you like one that speaks more to an urban audience? Would you like one that speaks Spanish, right? Do you want a woman? Do you want a man? What kind of prompt engineering? What don't you want it to answer? Right, that's just as important, right? We know kids that come from trauma are 15 times more likely to attempt suicide, right? So that's a mental health issue, but we're not mental health experts, right? So we don't want it to answer questions. The foundation doesn't want it to answer questions about suicide prevention, right? So you say, hey, I'm not an expert in that. I want to refer you out. That's prompt engineering. That protects the foundation. It uses AI in a way that the foundation benefits from. And so, if I may real quickly, we have a partner in Lebanon, and I was in Lebanon, the country of Lebanon, in June. They work with Syrian refugees, and every single Syrian refugee mom had a smartphone, right? And it was just a reminder, right? They're ubiquitous, no matter where you are. And ChatGPT can speak Arabic. Right? So now you're able to speak in their first language. If the foundation is working with Dearborn, Michigan, which has a huge Muslim population, a lot of Arabic-speaking, first language Arabic-speaking folks, guess what? We can create a persona that the foundation can use to drive their work with foster and adoptive parents by adapting to what the foundation needs. That's what we're in business for, is to make Rita and her team better at what they do, and that's the power of AI and how we can do that.
That's amazing. And I also wanted to kind of get into, just how are you driving this adoption for kids in need in terms of training folks? You're taking this, application from one environment into another. So how are your trainers being trained with this?
Yeah, and it's still in testing phase, so we're not actually using it yet, but we hope to be one of the first as they're rolling it out that we can use it. We fund over nearly 600 adoption professionals deeply embedded in all 50 states, DC, and most provinces in Canada, who are working with those children who've been waiting the longest in foster care, teenagers, sibling groups, children with special needs, children who resist permanency because they don't trust adults any longer. So it's going to be such a valuable tool as those recruiters, we call them, are out in the field. They can also be able to show this to foster parents, to potential adoptive parents, use it themselves as they're working with a caseload of children and may not be able to get through them in the way that they hope they can. So it's still in testing, but it's going to be a really valuable tool once it's off the ground and running.
Okay. Well, I'd like to turn the topic a bit to partnership again. And Alex, I'd like to ask you, how does Keurig Dr. Pepper really approach partnering with the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, and that helps you succeed with your customers? What are the business goals, and ultimately, how do you measure those? I mean, how are you doing?
We measure it through, quite honestly, sales and volume, right? It's dollars in the bank at the end of the day. Profit is not a dirty word. Dave said that. But for us to partner with the DTFA, let me think about this. We're in our 9th year of our elevated partnership. We've been involved since 1992, and earlier today they were talking about genuine relationships, right? Not artificial, not the CEO's gone, the new CMO. Wendy's, in the last 10 years, I've known 3 CMOs. I've known, I think 3 CEOs, 5 CMOs, right? So those change. What stays the same is the franchise community. And there are people I called on at Wendy's 23 years ago that I still call on today because they're still in the system. It's phenomenal. And they all get behind adoption. So we started partnering with the DTFA the year it was founded, 92. Dave asked, we answered. If you look at, there's this book called The History of Dr. Pepper 7-Up, or The Legend of Dr. Pepper 7-Up. The foreword is written by Dave Thomas. He is integral to who we are. The Wendy's system helped build our brand. So, 20 years ago, we were the number 7 soft drink brand in the US. Today, we're number 2, right? We're actually served in more restaurants. Dr. Pepper is served in more restaurants than Coca-Cola is, more restaurants than Pepsi-Cola is, because we're in both, right? Wendy's has Coca-Cola, and we love them. Like, it's a great partnership. Coca-Cola sells our Freestyle cartridges. But at Wendy's, what we are in year 9 of is something that nobody else is doing. Dr. Pepper and Coca-Cola, we set down our swords. We've gotten together, we've banded, and we work with Wendy's to support the DTFA. This is the 9th year. And so the benefit to my company is this year, 300 million cups, okay, went out with the Dr. Pepper logo on it. 85% of those drinks that were sold didn't have my product in it. They had Coke, it had Sprite, it had Frosty, it had iced tea, it had coffee. So it's a marketer's dream. I am targeting my direct competitor, right? And I'm doing good at the same time. It's like, it's a win-win. We're going to spend money on marketing, right? You guys market, find a cause that really works for you, works for your brand, and works for your partner. Be genuine, and you can't lose with the consumer. Because the consumer, if you're fake, they're going to see through it, right? So it's just very tangible. And the work they do is just so friggin' important, right? And we love to get behind it. And we work with other companies besides Wendy's and the DTFA. I was talking to Mike earlier, Big Brothers Big Sisters, Arby's, years ago we worked with them. I don't know if we are today. We work with DAV, with other partners, Disabled American Veterans, the Gary Sinise Foundation. They're companies and corporations. And one of the reasons it really makes sense for us is if you go to Wendy's, you don't know who made that hamburger, where that beef came from, okay? But there's some branded items in that restaurant that are iconic brands that resonate with consumers. Wendy's leverages those iconic brands. That's Dr. Pepper, that's Coca-Cola, it's Coke Zero, right? Frosty on its own. Dave's Craft Lemonades. I mean, there are things that they're doing that are phenomenal that they can leverage. So, Ed, you called it an omni-win. I love that because everybody wins in this scenario, and we help the kids along the way. So, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
Wendy, I thought you said 2 things, Alex, at the beginning that hit home and was unscripted, but you said that we've had 6 CMOs and we've had 3 CEOs, that management does turn over, and yet the quality endures. Why is that, Wendy?
Well, I think Dave just had his values, his virtuals, and we live by them. He has, give something back. That's part of our responsibility. Treat people nice. Like, okay, I remember when my dad mentioned treat people nice. I'm like, really, Dad? That's so gay or geeky or whatever. I'm like, he goes, well, think about it. Think about it, just treating people nice. It does go a long way. So I never argued with him on those ever again. But I just want to say, like, our partnerships with Dr. Pepper and that being on the cup and bringing awareness to the DTFA is a huge goal. And, like, you know, we have canisters, we have some signs in our stores, but we're always thinking of different ways. How do we keep bringing up awareness? And I think your AI really could help us actually in our store level. I'm just sitting here thinking, like, for my managers, and we've had managers adopt through the DTFA on kids. So, but if I could just teach more, and maybe in AI could help that, because I think that would probably explain it a lot quicker and faster to train them so they can talk to our customers about it as well, and just to tell their peers and everything. So I think you're really are.
I love that idea. Yeah, come on, that's good.
That's on my brain. It's like, how do we really tell people what Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption does? Because it is really a great organization, and so proud of it, as you can tell. Because these kids all need a chance, and we need them to be good kids and grow up and help the country and our world, because we all need help here. But I mean, I think AI is going to be a future for us, and I think our partnerships, like with Dr. Pepper, is very important. Even with our ad agencies, we need that partnership as well, because they're the brilliant ones that can say, oh, okay, let's, you know, wherever Clear Channel is, like, let's put them on this big billboard out here. We'll take that on if you guys want to donate that, just saying.
We actually have a bit of time, so I wanted to see if there were any questions from the audience before we move ahead. Yeah, there's one in the back. Oh, Suno. Okay, got it.
Yeah, great question. It's a bit like the Wild West. I think governments are going to catch up. There's going to be a lot of legislation coming. As a political aside, the Trump agenda is about less regulation. The Biden administration was about more regulation. So it's really driven by an organization's own ethical standard, right? And so back to the values conversation, even at Trauma-Free World, we need to create our own ethical standards around what is the ethical use of AI as compared not. And this includes these kind of guardrails. Where are we going and where shouldn't we go? And a lot of those are around things like HIPAA laws, gun violence, right? The kinds of questions that a caregiver would ask. Right, it's 2:00 in the morning. Hey, here's an example that we've been trying to wrap our minds around, right? Because there's different laws in different countries, right? A parent confesses, "Hey, I have a foster child, and I kind of lost it, and I beat them, or I locked them in their room, or I withdrew food." Right? Do we have an ethical responsibility to report that or not report that? What are the laws around that as compared to what aren't the laws around that? These are going to be ongoing conversations about the appropriate use of AI. Whether or not legislation drives us to those things, these are the guardrails that we need to figure out in general, and that an organization like Dave Thomas can direct us to say, hey, we don't want this conversation to be about that. We want to engineer AI so it avoids this conversation or answers in this particular way. But right now, as I said, it's a bit of a Wild West, and some of those guardrails are obvious. Some of those guardrails are a little bit nuanced, and as this is one reason why we're still in testing, right? We have partner organizations that we can say, we want to use this for about the next 2 months, and we want your feedback, right? Did it answer in a way that it shouldn't have? What do the subject matter experts say about it, right? So using kind of that lean innovation strategy to learn where those guardrails should be. I wish I could tell you what they all are, but everybody's running to catch up on the ethical side and the guardrail side, but we're no different. We're struggling to figure out where those are.
Okay, we could kind of, I'll have a follow-on question, which is just about AI in general and scaling. I mean, how do you scale this for the future? I mean, how do you make sure that it can do all of the training necessary, that you have the resources in place to do that?
I love that second part. Where are the resources to do that? So, we'll talk about that offline. Somebody can meet me. This is the beauty of AI, right? Is scaling, and we can scale in two ways. I think someone also mentioned earlier, right? It can take some of the administrative or some of the other issues off the board. Like I'll use Dave Thomas for example. They have 600 or so professional folks that are working on behalf of foster kids. How many times do you think they get called in a week from someone who has an emergency? That's number one. Well, what if they didn't have to call? What if 80% of those questions were answered by AI? What would that do to the longevity of the social workers who work for Dave Thomas Foundation, right? If they didn't have to call, they got an answer, right? That's one way to scale, right? The other way to scale is all of the people who Dave Thomas Foundation will love to go through training, as I mentioned before, but they don't have time, or they did it like 8 years ago, right? This is a resource that allows people who would never engage in training to have something right at their fingertips. I'd pull my phone out, right on their phone to say, I need help right now. That is something of value to not only the professionals that Dave Thomas Foundation employs, but every single one of those foster parents that they are so passionate about helping, and the kids that those adults are helping. That's the difference between 3 or 4 million adults in the world being empowered to help kids and 100 million adults in the world being empowered to help kids. That's what AI can do to scale the help for children.
Thank you. That's a lot. And Rita, I'm going to ask you a similar question, but from a different point of view. You said you had a board meeting this week, and you're looking over the future. I've got my Boo Book, but now I'm going to get a keychain. So let's say 10 million people go out there and buy one of these keychains. How will you scale, and where are you looking for in terms of expanding the mission and growing the organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. And we've been actively scaling for about the past 6 years this program. It's an evidence-based program that puts in place these adoption professionals that work on behalf of the kids that everyone else has given up on. If you look in their file, it says unadoptable. Well, it's unadoptable because of the behaviors that they've been exhibiting, because they've moved 15 times while they've been in foster care. So we've been taking this program to scale for the last 7 or 8 years. And so those dollars that come in the door from these huge things just means we can provide the kind of intervention for every child that needs this, not just 10% or 15% or 50% in a state, but 100% of the children that could benefit from this intervention that moves them into permanency. So it seems like a lot of money, and it seems like, I'm always asking Wendy and my board members, a third of whom are C-suite folks from Wendy's, and then franchisees as well. I'm always saying, is our handout too much? Are we asking too much? And so they always say, no, what more can we do? Thank God. I'm so honored to work with people like Kirk, Dr. Pepper, and Wendy's and others. It's not too much, but we're constantly surveying as well. So every few years through Harris Poll, we assess Americans' attitudes on foster care and adoption that drive our campaigns. Where can we dispel myths and misperceptions? But a secret part of that we don't publish is, and tell us about this relationship with Wendy's. And so we ask on the last one, which was about 3 years ago, what percentage of the people surveyed know that Wendy's supports foster care adoption? At that point, it was about 30%. So for that 70% that didn't know, we then asked, well, now that you know that Wendy's supports foster care adoption, how likely are you to go to Wendy's? Nearly 50% said, now we're going to Wendy's. So it has, that gives us pause and comfort that our hand isn't out too much because it is a partnership. We are hand in hand, arm in arm, understanding that doing good is good for business, not just for the cause.
Well, Wendy, what did your dad say about that?
Just give us more.
Or,
No,
and it
we
never
just
hurts to do what?
Yeah, profit's not a dirty word, and it really isn't, because profit is growth. And I think, the more we can make and the more awareness we can bring around the foster care kids, the better we all will be. And so we're always trying to help as much as we can. But, awareness is, as all of you marketers know, is the hardest thing to keep breaking through. And with AI and everything else, we just got to keep breaking through. So anybody has any great ideas, please call Rita. we're available, right?
24/7.
How are we doing for time? One more question from the audience, or are we done? From anything from the audience before we break?
Hi, I'm Josh Kruger. I'm from ICL. I have an uncle that works in Child Protective Services, and he can't tell me all the details that happens when he's on the job. But I was wondering in the future, how would AI step in and maybe make that process for the kid that was traumatized a little bit easier? Because I know that in the moment sometimes it's hard to trust somebody, especially if you're in such a dire situation. And how would AI make a difference compared to a human connection?
Man, Joshua, that is such a great question. It ties into the previous question a little bit about guardrails, right? There's a whole different level when you're working directly with children that you're not working on when you're directing your work towards adults who work with kids, right? The number one thing that we get asked is, when are you going to create AI that can talk and help a 14-year-old or a 16-year-old? I actually just had a series of calls with a group of kids, 18-year-olds, who have started a nonprofit in Ukraine for their friends. And they asked the exact same question: how can we help the youth of Ukraine? It is a minefield of ethical issues, but I do think in the long run, this will be a question that is answered so that kids can say, or right now young adults can get on and say, I grew up in a home like this, or I was abandoned as a kid, or whatever it might be. How can I pay more attention in school? How can I establish a long-lasting relationship? How do I not repeat what happened to me with my own kids if I ever get married and have children, or if I ever have children, right? These are the kinds of questions that kids would ask, but we need to figure out a way to make sure that it's completely safe and ethical when you're working with someone who's a minor. But in the long run, I think you're exactly right, Joshua. Kids, this is going to be a primary tool for kids themselves to ask the kinds of questions. It's a lightning round. The number one use of AI when it was first starting was a college kid from New Zealand who created for himself an AI about, he was depressed and he wanted to get help. And with no marketing, no nothing, it began to grow. Over millions and millions of college-age kids used his AI without any marketing or anything, because it was a felt need by every one of those college-age kids. The same thing is going to happen with people who are minors. We just need to get around or figure out the ethical issues of working directly with kids. I wouldn't do that, but I'm glad somebody is. They can figure out all the legal landmines for us ahead of time when they figure it out, right? So, right.
Just everyone, please join me in thanking Alex, Wendy, Rita, Rob. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Oh, fantastic.